I think this is going to go on now.
But I have a picture of the dress that I did for the Revolutionary War era.
The daughters of the American Revolution would absolutely love that. The sons of the American Revolution.
And I do hand stitching too.
There we go. Okay.
And
No.
I can do repairs on stuff where you order. I do the old time sewing.
I just want you to know you would be in. Here's the demand. This is your demand. You'd be in very high demand. I just want you to know that. I just can get you.
I have 3 sewing machines and a surgeon.
Do you have a business card you could get to me in the next half hour or hour?
I don't have a business card, but I can write down my info.
I had to be historically correct. I did not bring pencil and paper, but I know there's one in your room if you have a room. Okay. You know, I bet the head table could do that for you. Here at the Red Lion, they have a living stage. And when you go online and you register, you can look up under the living stage to see what's showing while you're here. And if you live locally, you can actually see what's showing here. And today, because we are so close to the 4th of July, they wanted to have a Revolutionary War presentation. I'm going to do a day in Colonial Life. What would it be like from the time you get up until you go to bed in 1776? And what all of that would look like and entail and how difficult it is, I'm telling you, I know, you just have to consider the source. It's a very good presentation. I like it. So, anyway, so I'm going to begin in about 1 minute. So if you like, have a seat. And if not, I mean, you can just walk through, come and go at your leisure. I do. Why don't I just get started, because it's 11 o'clock, and do you know where your Revolutionary War descendant is? He's right here on this stage. I just want you to know that.
Talking to the VFW.
I'm talking to the VFW today. Big conference here today. I sure appreciate all of you being here, and thank you for all of the service that you provided to the United States of America. I say that because my descendants, me, are thankful to our ancestors for providing the United States of America, because we were here before the United States was the United States. In fact, this being our first flag, it's the Betsy Ross flag. You probably notice it has 13 stars on it. This was adopted in 1781, although the flag resolution was passed in 1777. Took a long time for them to get to this flag. There were lots of iterations of this one. But anyway, this is a 13-star flag. It has 13 alternating red and white stripes with 13 stars representing a new constellation. And that's the flag resolution of 1777. So in 1776, I'd like to take you back a lot of years. And when we go back a lot of years, what you're going to find is... Now, let me explain what a lot of years is. This is 2000... the 21st century. I am going to take you back to the 20th century. So that means we have to go all the way back before computers. We had telephones that were on a wall with a cord, but now we have to go back before telephones, and we're going to go back to the 1800s. And then we're going to travel all the way back to the 1700s or the 18th century. And that's the Revolutionary War time. So what I'd like to let you know is my name is Art Dolan, and I am a member of the Sons of the American Revolution, and that means I traced my ancestry from today all the way back to the Revolutionary War. And my ancestor owned, thank you very much.
That is me.
I'll make,
Send me a text.
I will do that.
Send me a text.
I will take care of that for you, and I just want you to know, get ready.
I don't do costumes, but I love doing historical recollection.
Okay. I'll get that to you. Thank you. So my ancestor from 1776 was a tavern owner, which means Not only did he serve in the American Revolution, he probably served a lot of people in the American Revolution. So I'm going to take you all the way back to 1776. This was before we had electricity. This was before we had any modern conveniences. It's when life was very primitive. So let's take a look at what that was like. When you get up first thing in the morning, usually between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning, I wanted everyone in here to realize it's dark. So I'm going to take you back to, say, January of 1776. Probably the first thing that you have to do when you get up in the morning is you need to go to the bathroom. I'm sorry, it's not in the house. There's only one room in the house. And everybody slept in the great room. They would eat in the great room. They would clean up in the great room. Everything was done in that one room. So if you wanted to go to the bathroom, you had to go outside. And what I'm going to show you here is kind of a typical farm that we might see. It's a well-developed farm, but what I want you to know is there really would be out in the back an outhouse. That means you had to dig a deep hole.
I've been through it. I know the story.
Well, I thought I'd show you a very interesting outhouse. This is Abraham Lincoln's. It's in Illinois, and I went to his house, and in the back he's got a 3-hole toilet out in the back. One for large butts, one for medium butts, and one for small butts. And everybody could go and share at the same time. But I did want you to know it was an outhouse, and you obviously recognize that. That would also mean that to get out there, if it's the middle of the winter, you may need to have some light, especially if it's a cloudy night. If there's no snow on the ground, it could be very, very dark. So in order to get out there, you'd probably need to light a light. The light back then would have been a candle. And we had a candle in something like this, a candle holder, and the reason it had really small holes in it was if you were to take this same light and this same candle into the barn, you didn't want to have hot wax or sparks coming off of that because you probably had hay or straw in the floor of the barn. So how do you get that started? Well, some people said you could use matches, but matches won't be invented for another 35 to 51 years, depending upon where you read. So some people say, hey, I could use flint and steel. I have some steel, I have some flint, and you can make those sparks, and we will put that on a piece of charred cloth. That means it's unburned cloth. We could put it in a metal container, and that metal container we'd put on a fire, but we wouldn't burn it, we'd just turn it black, and that would be charred cloth, and we could put sparks on there, and it would light. But you could see those sparks didn't fall very far. And because they didn't fall very far, it was really hard to do that. So there was an easier way to light your candle. The fire was always burning. It burns 24 hours a day because you're always cooking, you're always making things. The food is always in preparation. Maybe you're even heating up fat, animal fat, deer fat, any kind of fat that you have, you render it, you turn it into a liquid, and that's how you made your candles. Because you see, everything in colonial times that you have was made from either plants, animals, or trees. Now, I know you're going to say a tree is a plant, but I wanted to separate building materials from plant materials because you see, this shirt is a plant material. This shirt is made from cotton. This is called a hunting frock. It was usually considered a work shirt. You'd wear this as an outer shirt. My inner shirt is my work shirt. It's also my night shirt. This is made from linen. Linen is a tall plant called flax. You take away the hard outside, you strip the inside, you weave it into a fabric, and it makes a nice softer material. So this is linen. And this is also my night shirt. This presentation is G, but if I were to, I could take my pants off, roll down my shirt, and it comes down to here. It's my night shirt. I get up in the morning, I roll it back up, I put my pants back on, and now it's my work shirt. You see, most colonials only had 2 sets of clothing. Which means if I'm wearing this today, I'm probably wearing it tomorrow, I'm probably wearing it next week, I'm probably wearing it next month, and I didn't wash it very often. But if I did, how often would I bathe as a colonial? Twice a year, which means I probably did not smell well most of the time. Oh, sure, I could go swimming in the summer, but I probably didn't do laundry all the time in the summer. But I could go swimming, but bathing with actual soap twice a year. Now, that's kind of an important concept, because when you take a look at bathing, we have a 1-room house, and the average family was 2 parents, 10 kids. So if you were to bathe in this house, you would have to walk down here, down to the stream to get the water, bring it back up, put it in a tin tub, heat that water, go down again, get some more water, bring it back up, down, back, 15 gallons of water, maybe 20 gallons of water, you'd heat it up, and then you could bathe in it. But wait, bathing was different. The bathing was different at that time because guests would go first. Then the oldest members of the family, mom and dad, would go next. The oldest child, and if you were the 10th child, you could be the 12th person in that bath water. And sometimes that water got pretty dirty. And when it gets pretty dirty, there is an old expression that says, don't throw the baby out with the bath water, because you might not even see the baby in there because it's so dirty. And for those of you who are watching this, both boys and girls, remember, this is a 1-room building. There is no privacy. You don't just have one person bathing. Mom is in there doing some of the chores. She could be making soap. She could be making candles. She could be making the dinner. She could be taking some of the beef, cutting the beef up and getting it ready for tomorrow. There's always activity in this particular house. So I just wanted you to know that when you have your own room today, the family had 1 room back then. So now we're going to take... You had 1 room in your childhood. 7 kids, 2 parents, in a 1-room house. The end of the 20th century. Wow. So it continues today. Yeah. Yeah. So where were you living then? Colorado and Kansas. Wow. Well, I don't want you to think that this was an easy time, because once you went out to the outhouse, you didn't actually go right back into the house and have breakfast. You had chores to take care of. So I thought I would put this one up and let you know that what the men's work and the women's work would look like. So if we take a look at the jobs for men and boys, they would plant the crops, build the fences, butcher the animals, repair tools, hunt, fish, and, depending upon where you lived, protect the family from invaders if you were out on the Western Territory. The women, on the other hand, would gather firewood, shuck and dry the corn so that it could last longer than just the season. You could dry it out and use it later on. They milked the cows, chopped the wood, made the brooms, candles, soaps, butter, and the meals, as well as working in the garden. In fact, generally speaking, here I have the house, here I have the fence. Everything within the fenced area was probably women's work. Everything outside the fence was considered to be the men's work. So the women worked equally hard as the men. In fact, they probably worked 9 times harder, just like you said. And that's an important concept to understand, because I am wearing this hunting frock and my breeches. My breeches were made by my wonderful bride. But she wore a long cotton dress with lots of petticoats underneath. And all day long, she was tending a fire. And the kids. And when you're tending the fire and cooking the food, you have to make certain that this big dress doesn't get anywhere near the fireplace. So we go out and we take care of our chores. So we go out to the barn, we feed the hogs, we take and milk the cows, we take care of all of those chores, we walk back inside the house, and now we're ready to have breakfast. The bowl that you may have used could have been made out of wood. This is a wood bowl, and you would have a cornmeal mush. So you take the cornmeal, you kind of mush it up, you'd heat it up, and you'd serve it here. To eat it, you would use a spoon. Now that's kind of an odd looking spoon. If I hold that in front of me, you can see that this is not a metal spoon. The spoon is made from a horn. It's called a horn spoon. This is hollow. If you boil this horn, remember the fire is going all day long, boil the horn, it will become soft. You can actually split this open, turn it into a hide, and mold that into a spoon. So you can have a horn spoon to eat your cornmeal mush. If you wanted to comb your hair, you could also have a horn comb for combing your hair. Because everything that we have is made from plants, animals, or trees. When we're done with our breakfast, we have a natural fiber brush that we have made, and you can use that to clean out the inside of your bowls. And to do that, you need soap. And the soap that I have here, it's a little discolored because you see this is a natural soap. It is made from animal fat and lye. I wonder where the colonists would get lye. I didn't hear that? Yes, it came from the fireplace ashes. That's exactly right. They would have a bucket with holes in the bottom. They would take the white ashes because you see they burned hardwoods back then. Hardwoods gave you a really nice white ash. You put the fireplace ashes in there, you pour hot water through it, and what comes out on the bottom is lye. So you mix the lye with the animal fats, you boil it and you boil it and you boil it until this white stuff floats to the top. You take that stuff off, you scrape it off, you put it in a wooden box, you let it harden, and then you can cut it into bars of soap. It was a horrible process. The lye hurts your nose, it hurts your eyes, and certainly it could burn your skin. But when we mix it with the animal fat, it does become a soap. We can take that same animal fat that we boiled to make the soap, we can boil that into the liquid portion, and we can pour that into candle molds, and we can make tallow candles. Or, if it's that time of year, we could make beeswax candles. Because you see, you would have to make a year's supply whenever the material was available. So now we've got our light. We've had our lantern. We moved in doors. We have now had breakfast. Could you brush your teeth in 1776? Depends upon how many children you had and how industrious you were, because you see, they had toothbrushes back then. It would probably take a month to make one of these because this is the rib bone of an animal. But this is hog's hair. So after you'd slop the hogs for breakfast, and then you butchered the hogs to eat them, now you're left with the skin. And the skin of the hog, you would boil for about 2 hours, and then you would use this. This is a hog scraper. You would put it down on the skin of the hog. You would scrape off all of the hair, using perhaps a nail. You'd make little holes in the bone using the hooves and tendons from animals. You could boil that down into a glue. You could put all of those in there and then use a pair of scissors and snip that off and get yourself a really nice hog's hair toothbrush. Now this one really is made from bone, but you can still purchase hog's hair toothbrushes today if you want to. They're incredibly expensive, which is why the colonists made them themselves. They would use glue, but there's another way too. I'm glad you asked that, because on some of the other brushes, they would put a hole all the way through it, and then they would use a very thin wire. Today we would call it florist wire, you know, that really thin wire, and they would just tie and twist around the bottom side of each one of those and then put their finger over it and brush their teeth like that. Now, obviously, when you're having breakfast and you've had your cornmeal mush, you'd like to rinse it down with something. I see some of you are enjoying your coffee today, but in 1776, we didn't do coffee. We did tea. So what I thought I would share with you is how they shipped tea from China as a brick. And then when you went to purchase the tea, you could break it off like a Hershey bar. You could buy either a small piece or you could buy a large brick of it. And to make the tea, you would take a sharp instrument or a sharp rock. You would scrape this into your cup, add water, and make your tea. And then from the Caribbean, by the way, I work with a lot of school groups. I want you to know I left the plastic on here on purpose because this is a really nice Caribbean brown sugar. Hello, Uncle Sam. Nice to see you. Just passing through. I appreciate that. In fact, you wouldn't be here if it weren't for my ancestors. Thank you very much. So this is Caribbean brown sugar. The reason I leave the plastic on there is when I hand it around to school groups, the first time I handed it around, everybody wanted to lick it. And by the time it got to the 30th kid in class, 29 kids had licked it first. And then it's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I didn't want to get any health issues. So what I did was I left this in the plastic. But it would come in a cone like this. And if you purchase this at the store, they had cone snippers. So if you only wanted a little bit, you could get it. You could buy the whole cone, or they also had larger cones. But that's how they purchased their sugar, and it came from the Caribbean. Now, I introduced this as their metal cup. This one's not very good. When you take a look, it's rusted on the inside. Of course, they didn't pay too much attention to that because they didn't understand germs or infections or things like that back then. But here's something really interesting. For all the women out here, seems the audience is all women today, you'll appreciate this. The nurses that followed the Revolutionary War camps, when soldiers were injured and recovering, they would put hot liquids in here, and sometimes the soldiers couldn't hold it, and when they put it up to their lips, it burned their lips. So it compounded their wounds healing, and now their lips healing. So what happened at that point in time was the nurses came along, and they said, what if I take a horn, boil it, cut it off, and put a wood plug in the bottom of it? I can make a horn cup. And that won't burn your lips. It also serves as an insulator. So the nurses, or the women of the Revolutionary War that followed those camps, actually came up with the horn cup. Absolutely fascinating. You didn't bring hot liquids out of that. That's exactly, thank you for that. That's a good testimonial. I appreciate that. You also mentioned something earlier about when company would come over. Did you say you measured the well? I misunderstood. My grandparents actually had a farm in New Hampshire. They lived in Massachusetts, but it was a gentleman's farm in New Hampshire where they raised chickens and a cow. What? And we did not have running water. It was a hand pump in the kitchen. And we would have to go out and drop a stick down into the well, pull it back up, and look at the water level to determine could we invite company for the weekend. I know, it's very interesting. All right, now that the chores are done, the meal is cooking. The large meal was eaten around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so everyone is now off to the farm, wherever it may be, the men out in the field, if they're clearing a field and you cut down a tree, then the tree has to be cut into pieces so it can be dragged off the field. Then you have to dig up the stump and then remove the stump. It could take up to a week to get one tree off of the field. So clearing land was a huge chore at that time, which is why I took all of the men to do that. Meanwhile, the women are working inside, taking care of the food and preparing the meals. But they were also responsible after that main meal at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for educating the children. What most people don't realize is education in revolutionary times took place between the 6th and the 8th grade, 2 years. After that, you were on the farm. Now, there are exceptions to that. If you happen to live close to a city, you could go to school in town if, say, your family was a merchant, not necessarily a farmer, and didn't require all of those children around. But if you're on the farm, you are going to be taught by your parents. Now, you probably know the book that they used. The Holy Bible. They would read that, and if children learned to read, it was through this book here. But if you happen to live near a city, or maybe there was a neighbor who decided to have a home school for you, you would use a book like this. This is the New England Primer, used from what we would call today K through 12, and this was used for over 100 years. One book. Wouldn't schools like to have that today, where you only have to buy one textbook for every student, and it's good for 12 years. I'll tell you, that would cut down the cost of schools. But it was the New England Primer, and they would just read it over and over and over again and learn how to read and write. But there was something else that took place also. Maybe you have seen these in your homes from your parents or grandparents. It's a sampler. They would needlepoint the letters of the alphabet, and in the home you might see one of these hanging on the wall, and it's how children learned the alphabet. Now, I hold this up, and if your eyesight is really good, you will notice that there are a couple of letters missing in this alphabet because the person who made this one made it with as many letters as they remembered. So anyway, that was really early, and that's a sampler, and that's how they would learn the alphabet. Some of the ways that they would learn how to read and write, maybe they would have another sampler that had a little bit of a writing on there, and they could compare this writing to what they would have in the Bible, and they would learn how to read and see this, and this would be a constant reference, perhaps hanging on the wall for them. Now, if they were going to write, yes, the precursor to a ballpoint pen. This would have been, it doesn't look like it, but a goose feather was the best. It had a really strong, rugged point on it, and you would dip this in the ink, and you might be able to get 2, maybe 3 words before you dipped it again, depending upon how hard you push on it. If you push down really hard, you might only get 2 or 3 letters before you have to dip it again. A crow's feather. That was wonderful. You could cut that, and it was great for very fine lines. But here is my question for you. Yes, we can find the feathers. In fact, we probably ate the ancestor of this feather because had a nice goose dinner with this one. That was nice. But where does the ink come from? From where? Bats. Bark. From where?
Gall.
Which is an iron-based ink. Iron gall ink is an iron-based ink. Yeah, but you know, I'm a farmer, and unfortunately I don't make a whole lot of money, and everything that I have in my home is made from either plants, animals, or trees, and I probably don't have enough money to buy ink, so I have to make my own ink. So I'm going to ask you very simply, in your mind's eye, walk through this one-room home. Where do you think I would find something black to make ink? Almost. What comes after charcoal? Charcoal is wood that you're going to burn, and when you burn the wood, it goes up as chimney smoke. And you could actually take chimney soot, mix that with water, and make your ink. I always love working with school groups because they always say, well, it comes from squid. I know it, but if you live 10 miles from the ocean, which isn't very far, you'd have to go 10 miles, which is a 1 day's ride, to buy the ink, spend the night, spend another day coming back, and you might only get a very small amount, whereas inside your chimney you could just scrape it off and have an unlimited amount. So then you could write letters. And as you wrote letters, it would be something like this. Let me see if I got one here that's open. I know I have. Yeah, here's one that's open. It would be written on a piece of paper like this. That would be folded up and sealed. And we would use a sealing wax right here. And I don't know if you've seen sealing wax, but you heat up a piece of wax. You have a stamp that you put in there, and then you mail the letter. And when that letter arrives, if that stamp or seal, the wax seal is broken, it means someone has read your letter. So this one has been written to Samuel Adams, and it's still intact. That means when he gets this, he knows that that letter has still been sealed and it's still secret. So they would use sealing wax for this. So you can see it's written with a quill pen. Do not get this in the water, because it was made with water. That means if it goes in the rain, raindrops get on it, you can lose the address of who you're sending it to. If you were fortunate enough to go into a school, paper was incredibly expensive. So they would use slate, which is a natural rock, and the pen that they used was nothing more than a small stick of slate. So it's slate on slate. And so I'm going to write on this one. I hope it doesn't interfere with the microphone too much, because I can write the word write. And then comes right off and you can use it again. This is the precursor to today's whiteboards, where they now have to use dry erase markers. They have the fumes that come up. And in revolutionary times, you could just use these over and over and over again. And should this break, you need another one, walk outside and pick up a rock, same kind, and you can write right on here without hurting the slate. Pretty cool. So I wanted to introduce two more items before I wrap this one up today, and the first one is money. You'll like this one. They did have coins in revolutionary times. Not a lot of them, but they did have revolutionary coins. So here we have what they call a Spanish pieces of 8. You probably heard pieces of 8, or a revolutionary dollar, it doesn't matter. But if you had one of these, women who followed the Revolutionary War camps might make $2 a month for following the camps, washing their clothes, taking care of the wounded. If you had more talent than that, you might get $4 a month. So if you went to buy something and all you had was $1, that was a lot of money. So what they could do is they could take that dollar and cut it in half. And now you would have 2 half dollars. You'll like this one. If you were to take that $1/2 and cut that in half, you would have what we call today a quarter, but back then it was called 2 bits. 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits, $1. That's where we get those cheers from for our cheerleaders. 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits, $1. It came from cutting Revolutionary War coins. It's really pretty cool. So the mom was probably the key figure in the home, Revolutionary War time. She kept the family together. She disciplined the children. She taught them the chores, kept them all in line. She wore a really nice cotton dress, but clothing back then was very, very difficult to make because it all had to be hand-stitched, which is why these pants are the way they are. You don't have to make them full length. You can just make them this length and I can grow into them. because you don't want to take the waist in and out all the time. They're really very kind of difficult to make. So when women made their dresses, pockets were very, very hard to make. So the dresses that they had little slits on the side of it. And underneath that, they had pockets that could either fit outside the dress or inside the dress. And since they only bathed twice a year, sometimes they would put sachets in there, aromatic plants so that they could smell well. Or if they were working in the kitchen and they wanted to have something handy, they would have a pocket. This could be worn outside the dress or just underneath the slit on the inside of the dress. And what might they keep in there besides all of those things I mentioned? Well, when it was time for the work to end and maybe play, she might hold some of the toys for the kids. This one is nothing more than a corncob doll. So corn husk doll. You peel off the husk, you let it dry, and you put it together. There are lots of instructions if you ever wanted to make one of these yourself. We're in corn season right now. That fresh first season corn is coming in right now. Save those husks. It'll show you how to make one of these. They had these, and if you simply pulled the husk apart, put a string here and a string here, you would have two legs. So this could be a unisex doll, this could be female, or you could pull it apart and give it legs and it become a male doll. One of the other toys that they had back then was Jacob's ladder. I don't know if you've seen the Jacob's ladder. Very, very simple toys. Other things that they could do would be hoop rolling, where they had a big, huge, either metal or wooden hoop, and you take a stick and you just push it along and see how far you could roll that. They also had a slide whistle. Or a horn whistle. They used everything that they had. This is a horn whistle. One end is one pitch, and then the other one. There's a cork in there. So knowing all of that, they have now gone through a day where they get up in the morning, they perform their chores, they made the meals. Tomorrow's meal is already cooking. They've collected the fat that they put in a barrel that's outside the door. They're going to render that down into both candles and soap. But the soap making process was so awful that they only made soap 3 days a year. Usually did it outside because the fumes that came off of that were absolutely horrible. They could burn your nose, they could burn your skin. So the soap making took place once a year. Normally when they did the soap making, because they were melting down all of that fat, they would make the candles at the same time. And if they could tie in collecting the honey and the beeswax, they could make beeswax candles at the same time. So with animal fat and lye were used to make the soap, and the lye came from fireplace ashes. Yeah.
What did it do to your skin?
It was not kind to your skin. You could put some nice berries in there in the fall, pick it up. If you got some aromatic berries, maybe some bayberries or something like that, you could put it in there, but it was still a very, very coarse soap. But they only bathe twice a year, so, you could put up with that. They do have to make a year's supply all at once because it was such a horrible process.
Is that what they used to clean their clothes with them?
Yes. When they cleaned their clothes. So I'm going to jump forward 100 years to when people in 1876 had more clothing, wealth was a little bit better, we were becoming more of an urban society. Dressers back then had 7 drawers in the in the bedroom. There were 7 drawers, and the bottom one was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You may have heard the expression that when I get dressed up, I'm dressed top drawer, which means I would wear my Sunday best clothes whenever I went out. And that's where the expression top drawer comes from. It's your finest clothes in the top drawer of your dresser. So with that, I've taken you from morning through the main meal, through your education, down to sundown. I've taken you through one day of Revolutionary War life, but I wanted to introduce my hat because I haven't talked about my hat yet. Hats, now this one has snaps on it for demonstration purposes. They're all round hats. They're just a round hat. This would be great for a farmer's hat. 90% of the people in colonial times were farmers. Only 10% lived in the city. You could wear this out, put this on your head. You could have a nice shade brim for yourself. Nice way to do it. The only reason it is a tricorn or a three-corner hat is because that was the style. Just like baseball caps are the style today. So with that, you are a very kind and wonderful audience, even with everyone moving back and forth during this conference. And I sure appreciate your time and thank you for spending your day with me. You have a tremendous rest of the day. I am here to answer any of your questions, or you can enlighten me because you seem to have so much information about this.
Well, I belong to the DAR.
Oh.
And my immigrant ancestor came to Boston in 1530. So, you know, I just know about this stuff because I've been interested in learning.
Well, interesting you should say that, because I don't usually do this on this particular presentation, but because yours came from Boston, I'm going to share this with you. If you were to get on Interstate 90 in Boston, don't go to Seattle. Just go 12 miles outside of Boston. You're going to come to Lexington and Concord. That's where the shot heard round the world was fired, at Lexington and Concord. So Concord Bridge is here. I'm moving towards Boston. This is Lexington. This is Bedford, Massachusetts. My ancestor lived in Bedford, and his family name was Fitch. He was Jeremiah Fitch. Number 12, the Great Road, is the Fitch Tavern, which is still there today, and it had been in our family from 1751 until 1951, when somebody just couldn't pay the taxes on it. Really, after 200 years, you'd think they'd be smart enough to know. But anyway. Yeah, because it's a historical building. And because the militia mustered there to go to Lexington and Concord and fight on the Green on April 19th, shot heard round the world, beginning of the Revolutionary War, it's supposed to be open on Patriots Day, April 19th. So I actually went back last year, knocked on the door and said, my ancestors have owned this home for the first 200 years. Now you're the owner of it. And she says, I have to tell you this funny story. She says, I bought this house. The Historical Society comes over on the 18th and knocks on my door and says, you will be open tomorrow to the public. And she says, why? And I was like, what do you mean, why? This is one of the oldest buildings of the American Revolution. You are always open. He said, the owner never told me. She said, I'm not the owner, but you're open tomorrow. And she has been open every April 19th since she bought the house, and is very proud to do it, and now actually dresses in revolutionary costume, and has written a couple of nice children's novels about the tavern, make-believe novels. They're fiction, but it's really delightful to watch her and see her evolution as she moved into this house. Because as a boy, when it was still in our family, yes, I was alive back then, they still have the great fireplace where the revolutionaries would sit around this table, same table, in the living room, and on either side of the fireplace, there were bookshelves. And on the right-hand side, in 1951, you could open up the right-hand one, and there were 3 bunks in there for the Underground Railroad. And they would actually allow blacks to move through there and stay there free, no repercussions, as they were moving to their next location. However, since 1951 and today, renovations have taken place inside the house, and that bedroom is no longer there. I know. They didn't call me. What were they thinking? I had all of that great information for them. So the other thing that I wanted to mention was Jeremiah Fitch, who owned the tavern, is my ancestor. So just as a little humor, I like to say that I am the descendant of a son of a bitch. You're going to ask. My last name is Dolan. I'm Art Dolan. And are you from here?
No, I live in Bellingham.
Oh, okay.
But my ancestor, Miles Merlin, they moved from Milford to New Windsor, Connecticut. And then he ended up living in Milford, Connecticut. And
Oh.
my brother and I went one time at a VFW convention in Philadelphia. We went up to Milford and we went to the house where Miles had built. And they're still, and the family let us come in to live there. And they said, well, the only part that still remains of the original house was just this little board alongside the bottom. Everything else has been totally replaced over these 200 years.
Yeah.
But, it was really fun.
Wow. I tell you, history is so exciting. And the fun part about doing that history is once you've always obviously done a lot of it, it's that when you go back and you trace your ancestors back, and you can actually go back to the graveyard where they were buried, and then you actually find the headstones and you go, it's not in a book anymore. Now it's real. Now it makes a huge amount of sense. And so when we traced some of our ancestors back, we actually went back to Concord, Massachusetts, to go to the graveyard, because my wife is from Concord. Her ancestors are from Concord. Funny story. As she did her history, she found out that her ancestor had 2 wives. The number one cause of death during the American Revolution was childbirth. So when his wife died, he ended up marrying his wife's sister. And you go to the graveyard, and here's his headstone, his wife, his second wife, and the sisters buried side by side. And you go, whoa, this is really true. Wow.
Yeah, well, Miles had, I think, 4 wives. And I was in Elizabeth.
Wow.
So I think it was the 3rd. I haven't looked at it for a while. And I think the first one there were no children.
So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave you with a thought.
Okay.
It's a good thought, and you'll like this thought. You know how you go back and you do your genealogy? You have done it. Have you done some of it? When you go back and you do your genealogy, you know how fascinating it is to find out what some of those people in your background have done? Or maybe what they didn't do, or maybe should have done, and you get those wonderful family stories? Here's something I don't think you've thought about. 4 generations from now, your descendants are going to look back at you, and they'll want to know your story. And if you think you haven't had a story, I'm going to go back and say, you were here during 9/11. And during 9/11, you know what it felt like to see those towers go down. You knew the emotion that you felt when, and that's a first-hand account. It's a first-hand account of you being here, that 4 generations from now, they're going to want to know, I wonder what that was like. And you can leave that story. If you're President Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., are you from Washington State? Idaho. Did you happen to live in Idaho in 1980? Because Idaho was in the direct path of the ash cloud from Mount St. Helens, May 18th, 1980. It was a Sunday morning. I remember I was on Lake Coeur d'Alene. So you know. You can give a first-hand account of what it would be like to be in the ashfall of a volcano. We have none of that, even though Vesuvius was this huge volcanic eruption. You have that experience. In fact, I lived in Spokane at the time, but I was sailing on Lake Coeur d'Alene. If you took a metal pipe, hammered it into your front lawn, pulled it out, used a stick, and poked out that plug of dirt, there is a white ring there that's May 18th, 1980, which is the ash fall that was on your front lawn and now has been covered up by the grass clippings over the last years.
We have 30 acres on that place, and cattle roam. But we have to go out to get the postal for the place. So far down.
There's that layer of ash. You have that history. That's something that you really should be passing on. So that was my final takeaway thought that says, I don't know what's important in your life. I don't know where you were, but I'm going to bet there are some things in your life that are significantly important in your family, because in the Sons of the American Revolution we say, because we were here during the American Revolution, the Daughters of the American Revolution, because we were here during the Revolution, our history is the nation's history, because our family has been here since the nation began. And there are very few families that can say that for any country that they live in, because some have been conquered, some have been taken over if we go to Europe, if we go to other places. But here in the United States, our history is the nation's history. So think about what it is that you want to pass on, because if you think of Jacqueline Kennedy, Jack Kennedy was not the prince that we all thought he was, but she created Camelot. So I just want to leave you with that, and just...
I have been writing my memoir, and I will put in there about and I actually do have 4 generations younger than me. Excuse me.
Sure. So I just want you to know your history is important, because we're on that timeline continuum from our ancestors to our descendants. They're going to want to know what was it like in your lifetime, because you were here for the first computer. Go ahead. I'm done. I was just doing some questions and answers.
Thank you very much. That was most interesting.
Do you know the cheer 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits a dollar? Yeah. They know the history of that.
Even indoor toilets when I was young. Now that's what I was into.
So I have a cousin who lives in Salem, Massachusetts. The house was built in 1780. The addition was built in 1840. They settled at different rates. So you can tell when you go from one house to the other, because they settled at different rates. There was no indoor plumbing then, so everything had to be retrofitted. Everything. Electrical, water, plumbing, all of that. Computers? Yeah, I know it. Thank you for your time this morning. I sure appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day.